Okay, so you always hear a lot about IQ, that intelligence quotient. But when was the last time you stopped to think about EQ, your emotional intelligence, EI or EQ, the emotional intelligence? So hey, my name is Raison. I am actually not at Ohio State today. I'm visiting another campus. I'm down at the University of Dayton. I like to change up the scenery a little bit. Plus I was down here and wanted to shoot this quick video. So let's dive in. Emotional intelligence in leadership. What is it? Well, first, have you ever studied or even read about EQ? It may be a totally foreign concept, or you may have read a few books or seen some TED Talks on it. Can you give me a theoretical definition, operational definition? Okay, I'm just teasing. You don't have to do any of that. This is extracted from a leadership class that I teach at Ohio State. It's a graduate level class. So we're not going to get a bunch into the theory. How's that for official? A bunch. But we want to talk about the practical applications of EQ. What does it mean? What does it look like? And how can you deploy it in your work, in your everyday life? Kind of an ongoing question that I throw out to my students is this. Could this thing called EQ be one of the most powerful tools that are in your leadership toolbox? Or is it just a buzzword? Well, let's jump in, let's talk about that, and then you can decide. So objectives for today: define EQ, what is it, and then recognize that framework and understand how you can apply it sort of in the everyday life. To me, that's the critical piece, is the practice, and that's where I always try to live, that intersection of theory and practice. So that's where really good stuff happens. We've got a lot going on here, right? Construction and everything else. Apologies for the noise. So anyway, let's jump in. So what is the definition of EQ, of emotional intelligence? It's really, it boils down to how do you recognize your own and other people's emotions? How do you discriminate these feelings? And how do you use the information, perhaps most critically or most importantly, how do you use that information to guide your thinking and your behavior? Because it's all about what we do with this. That's the critical piece. If we were in class, I would pause and show you a video clip here from Friends, but you can just Google it up. Google Friends, the male nanny. It's a 4-minute clip. It's really hilarious. So what happens in this is Rachel and Ross have hired a male nanny, and Ross isn't comfortable, so he wants to fire the guy. And there's a series, and I'll talk about it in a minute, of the emotional intelligence responses that occur within this clip. It's really good, so I encourage you to watch it offline. So, boil it down. Goleman, 1995, wrote some of the seminal work on emotional intelligence. He really boils it down and says it's an other way to be smart. Because if you better know your feelings, what can you use them to do? Think about that for a second. You can make better decisions. If you know yourself better, you can motivate yourself more. You can find empathy and be positive and encourage folks. You can improve your interactions at home, at work, in personal relationships. You can better manage business. There's a lot that really goes into this. So, what does Goleman list as the 5 kind of personal and social competencies? Self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills. Are you any good at this? Sometimes I can hit 1 or 2, sometimes I just miss the boat completely. But you probably know some people with no self-awareness, you know? Those guys are out there too, and that's all good. Let's talk about each one as we go through. Oh, so for the Friends, to break that down real quickly, the nanny, the male nanny, as he's getting fired, he deploys a huge amount of emotional intelligence. He regulates his response, the second one. He develops, as he's being fired, but he also deploys social skills and working with Ross and huge empathy. It's a really good example of 3 of the 5 pieces of emotional intelligence, and it's funny. So, self-awareness. You know your strengths, your preferences, your resources, your intuitions, and the limitations. Don't forget that piece. You know your why. If you've not watched Simon Sinek's Start With Why, I probably admonish every group to do that, the TED Talk, and then read the book if you would like to know more. It's really good. So how do you increase your self-awareness? What are some things you can do? Well, think about your Myers-Briggs type indicator. Think about taking the online Harvard implicit bias test. Thinking about doing a strengths finder from the Gallup Foundation. There's lots of ways that we can kind of take these assessments. They're not foolproof, but they give us insight as to kind of our preferences and our approaches to things. And so that's the most important part, is that you get those insights. Second, self-regulation. You control, channel, those events and moods and impulses and resources. You remember the E plus R equals O discussion? I talked about this in another video with Coach Urban Meyer at Ohio State. Whether on the field or off the field, an event happens, that's the E. You respond, the R factor, that's your response. And then it equals an outcome. And depending on how you respond, it can change that outcome dramatically. It can change people's lives. So, are you any good at this? Again, I hit and miss sometimes. I've got to press pause, take a deep breath, get my mind right. Those are the steps that you can use to make a better response, your R factor. Watch that other video if you haven't seen that. It's good stuff. Oh, so I call this a lucky self-regulation example. So my brother and I and our families were all together. We went up to Prince Edward Island, and we're doing some biking and exploring around, and just a great family trip. And Sunday morning came along. We went to and found a little local church, and of course we asked, so where do you go to eat? Where's the best breakfast place? And they told us, they directed us down there. We went, and it was fabulous, seaside. And well, the service wasn't that great, and the food wasn't all that stellar. But after we got done and we walked outside, we were literally walking across the parking lot. I'm talking to my brother, and I looked over at him. I was like, dude, wasn't that great? And he literally stopped walking and just looked, and I had to turn around. I'm like, what? He said, were you not just in there? I said, what do you mean? I don't know. What are you talking about? He said, the service, the food, everything, it just was not great. He said, are you just seeing the world through rose-colored glasses? And I said, I don't know. I said, I guess I just put that behind me already, because we're on vacation, we're together, we're at this beautiful place, and our families are having a wonderful time. And so I just got rid of that stuff. And he's like, I don't know how you do it. And I said, well, I don't either. But then I thought about it later, and on reflection, I remembered, wait a minute, my personal mission statement, and if you haven't done that exercise, I highly encourage it. It helps you drill down to what really matters in life. And to me, being encouraging and being grateful are my two, kind of boil down to two words that I choose every day. I've done that for over 15 years since I first did the mission statement as a 4-H exercise many years ago, and it stuck with me. So I really encourage that. So anyway, emotional intelligence can be learned, and you can grow it. That's one of the biggest things about EQ versus a lot of times they say IQ is a fixed measure. So there's still hope for me too. Motivation. So are you driven to achieve beyond the expectations? Do your emotional tendencies guide you to reach goals? Who's got a high motivation level? Do you know some people with that? I'm sure that you do. So think about what motivates you for a second. If we were in class, I'd have you break up and discuss this, or in pairs or something. So in general, though, we think about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. What could your manager do to increase your motivation? What specific steps? You probably can think of a couple of things. What can you do as a manager of other people to increase their motivation, intrinsically or extrinsically? Conversely, what might squash your motivation? Think about that for a second. So motivation theory is huge. I've got another video on that, or I'm going to shoot it, I don't remember. Anyway, watch for that. There's some really interesting stuff that we can unpack in motivation theory. Anyhow, so number 4, empathy. Beyond social awareness, what are the feelings and needs of others? So a lot of people think about sympathy and empathy almost simultaneously, and that's the same thing, but really sympathy is kind of feeling sorry for, other people. Empathy is really getting in their shoes, getting into and sharing those emotions. The sympathy says, I feel for you. Empathy says, I feel with you. So there's that deeper level. I like Steinbeck from way back. He says, it means very little to know that there are a million Chinese starving, unless you know one Chinese who is starving. It gets really personal really quickly when you know people. MLK talked about that. As we get to know each other, our differences dissolve, and we discover that we're more alike than we are different. Neat stuff. Really the root of empathy. Here's another example from me, and this was not one, this is one I learned about being empathetic. So I'm driving along in my amazing Honda Pilot, 186,000 miles on it. I was wanting to get 250, 350. I wanted to keep the car for another 10 years. And this little teenager tailgates me doing 50 miles an hour in an F-150 Ford pickup truck. Anyway, so airbags go off. I get out of the car and I go to check on him. I'm like, dude, are you okay? Are you okay? And we worked everything out and it was all good. Well, later that night, the dad called me, and he said, Brian, he said, this is so-and-so's dad, I just want to tell you, I just want to thank you. I'm like, oh, what'd I do? He said, well, my son could not get over your concern for him. He can't believe that you weren't mad and yelling and that sort of thing. And I said, okay, I didn't think about it. I was just worried about him. That was just my response. But as I reflected on that, I suddenly realized, wait a minute, that wasn't Brian Raison, some special guy. No, I learned that. I learned that from my pop 40 years ago when my sister maybe crashed her car once or twice. He would ask, are you okay? That was his first thing. And then he would tell us, my brother and my other sisters, the car is replaceable. You can fix metal, but you can't fix, or people, people are what really matters. I had learned that. And so again, EQ, emotional intelligence, is very learnable. Good stuff. Social skills. Are you adept at managing relationships with others? You know people who are good at that. Some people just kind of have it. Other people have to work on it a little bit more. Another example from Deb, a friend of mine up in Miami County, Ohio. The Locavore dinner team put together, had this big plan to do this on-the-farm dinner. They've become very popular. The 120-foot long table and the hay bales. It was so cool. But if you look at the inset picture, you'll see a few chefs in that picture. And we deployed 5 chefs to cook local food that we sourced, and so they didn't necessarily know what that was going to be. Well, if you've talked to any chefs, they're a pretty independent lot. How do you get 5 of them to work together to cook things that they're not used to cooking at a weird time under a tent out in a farm somewhere? Well, Deb was able to do that. She deployed some amazing social skills and EQ that made it all work. And not only did it work for that night and a wonderful payoff, but the next year, 2016, we doubled the attendance, and it continues today, 2018 and beyond. Pretty neat stuff, and it's thanks to her EQ and social skills. So, quick framework. I always like to say, start with yourself and a self-awareness piece. Take some of those assessments and learn more about yourself. That will help you increase your social awareness and increase your self-management, which then gets to the relationship piece in the lower right-hand corner. It's really good stuff. I always like to look at criticisms and throw these challenges out to my grad students, so here we go. Criticisms of emotional intelligence. Well, it's not really intelligence, it's a skill, it's an ability. Okay, I don't mind that. It's a good criticism. EQ impacts are overstated. There's potential for manipulation. Yeah, there's potential for that with anything. So I don't mind that too much. Poor research methodology. The construct validity doesn't measure what the instrument says it's measuring. Can it predict the predictive validity? Well, we could argue that back and forth and show data on both sides. But let me ask this one question. If you deploy and work on your self-awareness, your self-regulation, your personal motivation, your empathy with others, and social skills, how are your interactions going to be? Are they going to be improved or diminished? It's pretty clear stuff. I would love if everybody I know and work with and my family worked on these things. I'm working on them myself. But I just tell you, it's good stuff. Again, bottom line, emotional intelligence can be learned. Read about it, study it, observe it, practice. Really makes a difference. Next time in the OSU Extension Leadership Series, I'm going to talk about EQ and how it relates to authentic leadership theory, that construct. And till then, hope you guys have a great day. Thanks so much for listening.